Hey friends, it's Melanie. Welcome back to In the Kitchen with Mamaw. Today I've got a very special What's for Dinner. I'm going to try to channel my Mamaw in the kitchen today. That woman could cook anything. She cooked the best garden fresh food that you've ever had. She raised 9 kids, and I'm sure all she did was cook all the time. She always made from scratch. She used what she had from the garden and what they brought in from hunting. And she always took her time in the kitchen. She was the sweetest little woman. So today I am going to use garden fresh food. I have to be honest here, full transparency. I do not have a garden. I don't have the desire or the time or the energy to put into a garden, but I did visit my local fruit market, and that is where I got all my vegetables and fruit that I'm going to be using today in my meal. So I hope this will take you back to a simpler time today. It wasn't simple in the kitchen, it was a lot more work, but it so pays off in the end. So today I want you to sit back, relax, enjoy my summer garden fresh meal straight from my kitchen to you. I hope you enjoy it, and if you'll stay to the end, I will give you a little more footage from my local market. We just always called it the market. The way I start out with fresh green beans is get my big pot, 1 pot meal here, get all my bacon chopped up and start cooking it up in my pot, because we want that flavor from it. And I don't even know how much beans I had as far as weight or anything. I'm not canning or anything like that. I'm just cooking enough for today's meal. So first thing you got to do with those green beans is string them and break them. You can see my bacon is looking good as I'm going through these green beans in here. Just keep turning it around so it'll get good and done up. And it's okay if it's not completely done, because it's going to cook some more with the green beans. I'm making progress here. This takes me back. I can remember I used to love to string and break beans. I was not the best stringer, and even now I'm not the best, because when you cook these up, there'll be a string here or there, but that's how fresh cooking goes. So once you get them all strung and broke, I give them a really good wash in the sink, and then I just put them in my big pot with the bacon, grease and all, and then I'll cover them real good with water. Then I'm going to season them just a little bit to begin with some salt and pepper. That bacon and the grease from the bacon is going to give it just about all the flavor it needs, but I do like a fair amount of salt and pepper in mine. And my Mamaw, the way that she did her green beans was to bring them up to a boil and then put a lid on them and just let them cook. Don't mess with them anymore. So I wanted some new potatoes to go in mine. I just washed up a few little new potatoes and cut them all up. And when my green beans were almost done, I put them in, and I just kind of mushed them down in there a little bit, tried to get them covered in the water. But they're going to cook in no time, because they can steam when you put the lid on them. Now the green beans, they take probably a good 2 hours to get good and done, and I didn't want mine just completely cooked to mush, but I did want them seasoned up good. And the next thing I'm going to do is fry up some yellow squash. I saw Marshall, Southern Boy Cooking, cut his squash like this. He said this is how his mama did it, and you really can get more in your skillet this way. I have taken individual pieces of squash before and dredged them, in milk and egg and floured them and fried them, but this is just a whole lot quicker. And when you're going to do a bunch, it's just as good. In the bowl that I've cut it up in, I'm going to put about a cup of cornmeal and then about a cup of flour. And all mine is self-rising cornmeal mix and self-rising flour. And then I'm going to put the lid on that. If you don't have a nice big bowl with the lid, you can put all this in a gallon-sized baggie, and you're just going to shake it real good so it can coat that squash. And then that doesn't take a long time to fry up, so I'm just going to set that to the side for a minute. Now I've got my green tomatoes all washed up, and I'm going to go ahead, and I'm the only one here in my house that will eat a fried green tomato today. My one daughter that likes them is out of town. I'm so sorry that she missed this meal, but I'm just going to cook up one, and then I'll share some with my daddy. But I just put them out on a little rack there so they could kind of maybe dry out a little bit, because when you're trying to fry a green tomato, water is the enemy in those. And then I'm just going to slice up that yellow tomato just to eat on the side. Also slicing up some onion to eat on the side, and a little bit of onion to go into my squash. And you see I'm going to salt them green tomatoes. That salt will help draw out some of the water in that. I don't like a tomato on a sandwich. I like a fried green tomato, and I will eat a Mr. Stripey or a yellow tomato just by itself with the meal. I like salsas, and I like them cut up on a salad, but I just don't like them on a sandwich like that. So I've got my cast iron skillet good and hot. I have tested my oil with just a little bit of flour, and it was good and frying up. So I'm going to get my squash going, and I'm using a slotted spoon here because you don't want all of that extra flour just put down in your grease. It'll make a big gooey mess. You won't like that. So as I'm putting this squash in, I'm just taking my slotted spoon over the bowl it's in and sifting the extra batter or the extra flour coating off of that. Once I get everything coated and it begins to cook, then I'm going to salt and pepper it. I didn't salt and pepper my batter because I knew I wasn't going to have this like dredged in milk or anything to help it stick. So I waited until it got, a little bit wet from the oil, and then I salt and peppered it good in the skillet. Now I am battering up my green onions, and I've just got plain old buttermilk here in a little container. Get them good, coated in that, and then I'm just using my leftover flour and cornmeal from my squash. And I'm just going to coat them real good and set them back on that little rack and let them continue to just soak in that buttermilk and dry out just a little bit more if they can. Now I don't put my onion in my squash right away because I don't want it, to burn. I wait until my squash is pretty well done, and then I'll put my onions in there, and it can kind of cook up, steam and fry up in there. And this squash at this point was perfect. And don't do what I did. I remembered I just put oil in my pan and I didn't put butter, and I love the flavor of butter. But if you add it at this point, it's melting down, and it totally messed up my crunchiness. And it still tastes great. The flavor was wonderful, but you can see the butter down in there and how it got everything wet again. I like a little bit of crunch on my squash. So that went away, but it was still good. So now I've got another little pan ready. I've tested my batter in that, and I'm just going to fry up these green tomatoes. And you can see before I put them in the skillet, I kind of take a paper towel to them and kind of press that on top of that to try to get some more of that water out. And you just can't get it out. Now my mama, she sometimes will just cut green tomatoes up in little pieces and take one big skillet, and she will batter up like I did in the bowl. She'll do the squash, okra, green tomatoes, and every now and again she's put potatoes in it too, and she'll just do one big pan of everything fried up together, and that is easy and delicious. So here you see, once my green tomatoes get to cooking on one side, I'm going to flip them over and I'm going to salt and pepper them just like I did my squash whenever the batter gets to sticking to it real good and the oil's in there. Then I'm going to turn them over. You just want maybe 3 or 4 minutes on each side. And I do salt and pepper each side of them. And you'll see on the stove eye back behind there, I've got some pinto beans that I had cooked and we ate out of the day before. I had cooked them all day in the crock pot for supper because I knew we would want some pinto beans and cornbread. So I made plenty the day before so we could have it left over to go with this meal. Oh, look at it. Ain't it pretty? I just put it on a paper towel to let some of the grease come off of it there. And here's my last 2 slices. Salt and pepper, and just do the same old thing to them. And here it is plated up. There's one of my fried green tomatoes, squash and onions. Look at that, green beans, new potatoes with the bacon, pinto beans, cornbread, and onions. This was so good. I had to go and just sit down and have myself a good rest after cooking this meal and eating it. It was so delicious. So they had the best looking peaches up there. I have never made peach hand pies. We've always made apple, but I was going to try these out. First thing you got to do is peel your peaches and slice them off of that pit. And I threw in about 2 tablespoons of butter and a tablespoon of vanilla and got it all in my skillet there, and then I put my peaches in. And those were the best peaches. They were so juicy and smelled wonderful. Then when I got all that coated with the butter and the vanilla, I put in a 1/4 cup of regular sugar and then a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. And recipes like this, they'll tell you to put in, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg and clove and cinnamon. I just use pumpkin pie spice. It has all the good baking spices in one thing, and I think I probably put in about 1/2 of a teaspoon, maybe a little bit more, and then I just threw in a little dash of salt in there. I had to use lemon juice because I did not have a lemon to zest, and I think I used about 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. You can Google how much lemon juice you substitute for the zest of like 1/2 of a lemon or a lemon. And then you're just going to let this cook, and you just stir it ever so often and let this reduce down. And then some of my peaches, I kind of chunked them up a little bit more. I had found a recipe to do these using the refrigerated pie crust instead of refrigerated biscuits, which is what I normally use when I fry pies. These you're going to bake them in the oven. Instead of a glaze, you use cinnamon sugar on them, and I thought that sounded pretty good. So I also went ahead and made up an egg wash to put on top of them. You're just going to use 1 egg white and a couple little tablespoons full of water to make your cinnamon and sugar stick. And a little tip, keep your egg yolks, whenever you use egg whites, you can just keep those in the refrigerator like you would an egg, and the next time you go to scramble eggs, you can just throw that in. So you can see my peaches cooking on down. Oh, it was smelling so good in here. And while I had this going on, I needed to get to cutting out my pie crust. And the box has 2 pie crusts in it, so I used both of them. You can see they had tear apart just a little bit, so I just kind of mushed it back together and then rolled them out just to stretch it a little bit. My Mamaw Macaulay, when she did fried apple pies, she always used canned biscuit dough, and that's what I've used too, and I've always fried them on top of the stove. This little recipe that I found using the refrigerated pie crust was baking them, so I'm going to try that today. I used mine as a guide to cut out my pie crust, but they looked pretty little to me. I can't make my pie crust and things look perfect, so I did save me out just a couple pieces of dough to make me some big, gooey, misshapen ones. I like to say that my food looks rustic. I could never decorate a cake or anything perfectly. Here's my 2 that I made, and then you can just get just a little bit in these, and some of mine, they had to have some pie filling coming out the sides. You know, that's just a little pie, but I guess we don't need to eat that big of one. You're just going to put your filling, and that's been sitting on the stove cooling while I was over here fooling with this pie crust. Then you're just going to put it on one side, fold your dough over, and then try to press around the edges just the best you can. Use a little fork to make a little, decorative design, and then it helps seal the pie filling in too. Honestly, you don't even need it. You don't even need the pie crust. This filling was so good. I just put some ice cream or something on it. I swear it was good. And these were good, but I will say I like the canned biscuit better. I like the taste of it better. And there's my 2 rustic pies. You can get a little bit more filling in them. And I just like the looks of them. I don't like things like this to look perfect. Not to mention I can't make them look perfect. But I just do the same thing with them. I just pull it over and I kind of use my fingers to seal it up, and I come around with the fork just a little bit. So there's what they look like, and I'm going to take my little egg wash and go over the top of each of them. And then I'm going to sprinkle the cinnamon sugar on top and bake them up. And it did smell good. And this was very good. The cinnamon sugar was really good on them. But I think a glaze would be real good too. I just like a glaze. And you're going to bake those in a 350 oven. About 15 or 20 minutes. And there I am giving it the finger poke test to, see if it feels like those crusts are done. And look how cute. They're just little old tiny things, and here's you a good look at my big gooey one. These were so good. I had the most fun making this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. This was a full day of cooking. I certainly appreciate all the time and trouble that my mama put in all those years cooking that food from scratch, from the garden. This is just the cooking. This is not all the energy and hours that go into actually growing your own food. And if you have not checked out your local fruit market, I encourage you to do that. There's so much more there than just fruits and vegetables. I'm going to give you a little bit of footage here so you can see what my market had to offer. And I did not even get the beautiful footage of all their flowers. They keep bedding plants and hanging baskets and all kinds of flowers there. But it was so much fun to do this. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I hope that you would subscribe to my channel and come back for more. I hope that my Mamaw will be looking down from heaven, proud of what I've put together today. She raised 9 children, and I know that was not easy in and of itself. She never got in a hurry. You always felt welcome at her house. She was never rushed, and she took her time and put love into everything that she did. She was the funniest little woman. Sometimes she meant to be funny and sometimes she didn't, but she is dearly missed, and I hope that our cooking will carry on her memory and her traditions. And guys, I thank you so much again for watching. I appreciate you, and until I see you again, I send you love from my kitchen.